Hello. Yeah, so this is yet another edition in which I am steering the ship. I'm doing this from my Airbnb down in Brighton for Have Heart weekend. Great show last night. Christian will be around, potentially on screen / on mic, but most likely in the capacity of doing behind the scenes work and engaging with people in the comments section. A little bit of a different makeup today. We have a special guest coming on, I believe. We'll see what the scenery is like. Just looking at some things here. Hello. There's Damien. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
This thing wants to fully process. That would be nice. Yeah, it's like I know you're here, and obviously we can interact, but your picture is taking a moment to show up. Uh, so that's a thing. Hold on just a moment. Oh, let me try that again. Sorry about the technical issues we're experiencing here, folks. Let's hope this second take is a little better. Yes, perfect. Hello, sir.
Hey, how you doing, my dude?
Pretty solid. Got the goods from last night already on display. It's pretty sick, as you'd expect from hometown gig.
Oh yeah,
Great energy and all that.
it's pretty dope. Yes, Steve should be sending. I told him how to go in. He was going to be going and clicking and stuff. So
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so here's like a kind of like a quick filler talking point that is somewhat amusing. Were you aware that, because I know you're big into players' habits and stuff, but were you aware that Mark Scheifele is an adherent to the TB12 diet?
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that it's caught on, to a pretty great degree. So, it's interesting to see that he's on that list of people who've taken away something from it. Hello,
Hello.
welcome aboard. Yeah, I've
Thanks for
heard
having me.
quite a bit of things from Damien about the sort of gems that you have for us. Welcome aboard our guest for today, Steve Shaw.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I got plenty of stories from working down at Logan, from meeting a bunch of the guys that came through, from getting the ever living crap scared out of me by Sean Thornton to talking contract talk with Charlie McAvoy. So a lot of good stories.
Yep. Damien dropped out just temporarily. Let's see. Let's see if he has a little bit more luck on the technical side this time around. Yeah, that's better.
And he's there.
But I saw Kevin Stevens on that list as well. I thought that was pretty interesting.
I had about a good 35-minute conversation with Kevin Stevens, and he shared how they actually did lose the Stanley Cup for 4 days. after they won back in the 90s, and it miraculously turned up in the trunk of some guy's car, and he never even made it. But
Wow.
I asked him for a couple other stories, and he said that without getting himself in trouble or incriminating others, he could not share all that.
Yeah.
So
That's like, the Cup has such a great mythos when you follow along some of the adventures it's been on. Like when it got dented in Vinnie Paul's pool when the Stars won it in '99. That's always a classic.
it also, according to Kevin Stevens, got dented in Mario Lemieux's pool as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I've
but I mean,
heard.
the,
That's
the most coveted trophy in sports history, that, what, 5 feet and weighs 35 pounds. I mean, I don't know how you just misplace it for 4 days. Like, how much alcohol was flowing, you just lose it.
Yeah, and it's tough because like uh, it kind of reflects the culture of the sport in a way. Because I know guys like when they win it for the first time, they just have so much adrenaline that it feels a lot lighter for them to pick up than it should be on paper. So it's like
Now, have either of you guys ever touched or felt it, held it?
not me.
I did it in 2011 when they came through. They were flying out of Logan about 4 or 5 days after they won it here in Boston. And I was working in the oversized area of JetBlue. And the first case that came through, we were all like, what the hell is this? So we opened it up, and it was Tim Thompson. So, of course, I looked at it, held it. I was like amazed, and I started calling everyone I knew. And before you knew it, there were just flock and flock of people around the oversized room in the upstairs terminal with JetBlue back in the day. And lo and behold, about 5 minutes later, after we were admiring the Conn Smythe, we opened up another case, and there it was in all its glory. And the handler, I forget his name now, I'm drawing a blank, but he was there and just told us, he said, guys, listen, we know you're going to look at it. We know you're going to lift it up and everything, but just please be as careful as possible with it. And once we examined the case and found out they weren't hiding any contraband or anything inside of it, he took it out in full glory and just let so many state troopers and so many TSA personnel just, hold it, pose with it. About 55 to 60 people all came over and got pictures taken with this thing. And it was just actually holding it in your hand is just something that is just out of this world. I mean, it's something you never think would happen to you. And then all of a sudden you're like, I have to be able to nearly cut my hands.
That's awesome.
But the Conn Smythe actually looks beautiful. I mean, TV does that trophy no justice whatsoever.
Yeah, I bet. It was just absolute pandemonium in like the ensuing few months in the city when that cup win happened. Like they racked up that ridiculous bar tab.
I've seen pictures of it, yeah.
And like and of course, I believe the Bruins set the record for most rings given out that year as well. And Andrew Ference let that flash mob in the North End a couple of months later. That was pretty intense. Good stuff.
But I met a bunch of the guys the following season is when I actually started meeting them. It was the All-Star break of the 2012 season. A bunch of the guys came through early morning, and me in the Homer fanboy, of course, get the head nod, who's that, and all of a sudden I was looked up one day, and it was the first time I ever met Sean Payton standing in front of me, and I said, a bunch of the other guys were there this morning, and this is the time to ever really tell up. So we're talking for a few minutes, and then he all smiles, he's happy, he's good to go, and he says, who flew out? I said, Bergie and his wife and kids flew out, and Chara and his wife and kids flew out, and Marshawn and his wife and daughter flew out, and he just turned stone faced. He's one of the biggest enforcers of the NHL, literally 3.5 feet from me, and he just gave the biggest mean mug, and that is not his daughter, and that is not his wife. I was just like, whoa, like, my bad. And then he went on to tell me that, at that time, Brad was a young guy in the league. I think he was only either 2 or 3 in 2012. And He's telling me that she was just some little bunny that used to hang around wherever they went to. And she was just looking to get across that the hockey player she could. And they all tried to warn him at the time that, you know, yeah, this is the type of lady you want to look for. You have to stay away from this type over here. He want to listen. And at that age, you have that much money and that young, and you off a family type of woman. What kid's going to listen to the older guy that says, "Don't go near these ladies"? So, I mean, I get it. He like, I literally had to step back when his face changed. And then after that, I probably met Sean about 8 to 10 more times flying through when he became an executive down in Florida and coming back here. He still had the house in Charleston. So he was constantly back and forth and back and forth. And we got to the point where, you know, I no longer called him Sean. You know, he told me I'll just call me Tony, just like everyone else does. So, I mean, if I didn't notice him first, he threw a jet blue. He'd find me and come over and kiss my hand and say hi. So he was like, for someone who has the reputation of one of the toughest guys in the NHL during playing, he's probably the biggest candidate we've ever met. So he's actually pretty cool. But I remember also when Charlie McAvoy was going into free agency season, and he was talking contract with Boston, and he came through because at the time he was doing for Mike Sullivan, the coach. He was dating his youngest daughter. So I look up and, you know, I've seen Sully a few times coming in and out, and, you know, having the house in Hingham and going back and forth to Pittsburgh all the time. He was flying jets constantly. So they were flying out on vacation, and he saw Sully and his wife and the daughters and everything. I'm like, oh, cool to see him trip, and he gave me a smile, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, McAvoy bringing up the rear of the plane. So I would go over. I said, well, look at you. If things don't work out for you, you're already kissing up to your father about him. He's getting the playing time, huh? And he just started, we'll go back to the I think these signs together 4 years. And I asked him flat out, I said, would you sign it for a 4-year, $20 million deal? And he said, honestly, no, I won't. And I just looked at him like he had 4 heads and said, why not? And he said the year before, he was going to contract with Boston. They approached English extension. And they were looking to extend him at 6.5 per season. And at the time, he didn't know how much cap trouble the team was going to be in. So he thought if he had a deep season, he could have that 6.5 bump up. So he was the contract extension. So you guys don't know about that? I said, no one knows. No one knows they offered you a 6.5 per. He said, well, they did. I said, well, you might want to get that out there. Because why? You're just playing in Boston. Boston doesn't care how good you are. Boston cares about what have you done for me lately. That type of thing. That's all they want to know. I said, right now in Boston, you're a holdout. You're the bad guy. I said, you know, it's reported on their end that they've offered you multiple deals, and you said no. He goes, right. They offered me a $6.5 million a year extension. So they got to come to the floor and see guys. And I said, no, that makes sense. But again, you know, you know that. I said, even John probably knows that, but no one else knows. I said, it's never been reported that you had a contract and you refused it. So he was thinking, and he was going over it. He goes, I might want to get that out there. I said, you might want to get that out there, because right now you look like public enemy number one. Because, you know, the people around here love your style of play. They want you to stay here. And, you know, right now you're a holdout, and it looks like you're just being – and this is where I'm brutally honest. I said, this is where it looks like you're being a money-hungry grub. And, you know, we want you to stay, but it looks like you don't want to be here. And, oh, no, I love it here. I said, well, you need to work something out. But I realized with all the people that fly through, it's the hockey players that are the most down-to-earth. They will sit there and have any conversation with you. It could be about hockey. It could be about a fishing trip. They don't care what it is. They're just, you know, as long as you're not pulling the Chris Farley episode of Saturday Night Live, where it's like, did you remember this? That's awesome. Like, they'll talk to you all the time. I had a 45-minute conversation with Mike Greer about an upcoming draft, and I'm on the fucking work. And neither one of us realized how much time it flew by. And 45 minutes later, and I was like, oh, holy shit, Mike, I got to go back to work. He's like, yeah, I got to get down to the gate for this flight. They're probably at this point waiting for me. He was just happy to be, recognized. And he just stood there. And, him and I were talking like we'd known each other for 15, 20 years. And it's the first time I ever met him. So that's one thing I love about this sport is the openness, the inclusiveness. It doesn't matter how big, small, hockey just takes everybody.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about the interactions in this market too is you kind of see that attitude drawn out by the impression that it makes on some of those guys. Because one guy who was in the Boston organization for a very short period of time but had a lasting long impression on, make a lasting impression on was Jerome McGinley, with him still living in Chestnut Hill for so many years and having his son play youth hockey there, with him having recently been drafted by Utah. So it's just like, something about it really draws out the alumni from that org to where they just want to have a life here, no matter how short their association with the Bruins might have been.
The alumni, they come through constantly. I mean, if a member of the older 70 team passed away, I mean, every single guy that was on that team, it doesn't matter if you played 3 shifts or if you played the entire season, every single person that suits up with them shows up. I mean, I've met so many, back in the day, I met Terry O'Reilly so many times, Derek Sanderson. I've yet to meet Bobby Orr. I don't know what airline he flies. I haven't seen him come through. I mean, I would absolutely love to, but I haven't met him yet. It doesn't matter how long you play for this organization. If you put that jersey on once, you're in this organization for life. And that's one thing that, as much crap as they get for being stingy owners, that's one thing I've always liked about the Jacobs is they, once you were in, you were in.
Yeah. Yeah. There are some things we've talked about this before. There are some things that were kind of left on the table in terms of what they could have done in terms of like the centennial celebrations this past year. But I also think that when they went and honored these people that wore that jersey, I think they did all the right things. Like, I love the reception that Normand Levier got when he did that ceremonial puck drop before the Rangers game, especially like knowing that not only did it still resonate with people that his career ended so soon, but like that his life has been meant a lot since then, with him having become like very involved in disability activism and things like that back out in Quebec. So that was very cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, some of the celebrations they did, you heard what was coming up and you were like, oh, I'm kind of excited for this. But then when you actually saw what was presented on ice, and it's like, you guys could have done so much better, especially for a centennial season. I mean, it's some of the stuff was spot on and great, and then other errors that they did when they had their celebrations, it was, you just looked at it going, I don't know who planned this, but someone dropped the ball. Some of it was real nice, but others were just like, wow, like this is what you're gonna do for these guys. Like, you could have done so much more. And I'm honestly surprised they didn't celebrate Willie O'Ree a little bit better this season. I mean, knowing how much of an ambassador he's been to the game, how he stayed local basically his whole life, and how much he's helped develop and push the game of hockey, especially in the minority communities around the city, that he was just such an ambassador for the game.
Yeah, and you know what, like, that was I think a topic we took on a while back too. Like, aside from the history making that he made and the efforts he's done since then, like, you share a building with the Boston Celtics, who have done more for Black and Jewish involvement in their sport than any other franchise.
Right.
And so it's just like, you
are occupying this space and this very involved history in this significant thing when it comes to inclusion, and you're not doing more to acknowledge.
NHL actually made him a full-on ambassador, but it's just the organization itself could have done so much better for him and his family and everything else, especially being such a pioneer. I mean, you look across other sports with the absolute first. I mean, you think of baseball and you think of first. What's the first thing that popped into your mind? The number 42 and Jackie Robinson. And, you mentioned the first black hockey player in the NHL, and I guarantee you a good 60% of the fans have no idea who Willie O'Ree was. And I just think the game itself could have done a lot more to promote that. And if the league didn't want to, then the organization should have. I mean, they just let so many opportunities slip through their fingers when celebrating so many good things. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love this organization. I mean, I've been a fan for 42 years. I mean, I was 4 years old, and I remember watching back on the old TV 38 days, listening to Fred and Derek, and my mom got me into them so young. And it's just, I can't tell you how many times I turned the TV down and I tried to imitate Fred Cusack's voice and try to call a game myself. So, I mean, I've been such a fan of this team, and I can sit there. I've told Damien at work, I'm not the typical Boston fan where it's like, my team's so great and your team is horrible. Like, oh no, our team has dropped the ball an awful lot. Our team is screwed up. I mean, when your Flyers took us back in 2010 in the reverse sweep, I mean, it was miraculous. I mean, it was heartbreaking for me. But to see that run that they went on after being down, 3-0 in that series and go on a reverse sweep like that was just, something that the sport needed at the time. So I can look at other teams and actually respect other teams and, see deals that they've made and know that, no, this team's going to be great. This team's going to be garbage. This team's going to be all right. They're going to be a run-of-the-mill team. But especially at the end of this season, I knew I've told Damien numerous times, and I stuck to my guns. I said the Stanley Cup winner is going to come out of the West. This is before the very first playoff game, and everyone's like, well, you're a Boston fan. You're not going to – I said, no, if my Bruins make it, that'd be great. But it's just – I said the West, the hockey they're playing out there is just – it's night and day compared to what they're playing over here in the East. And it's not easy. Sometimes it doesn't look like the same sport. So I can look at other teams around the league and just, be a fan of them as well, knowing that I still have my team. But I'm not just a Bruins fan. I'm an actual hockey fan. So it makes it more fun.
Yeah. It's funny, just sometimes you contrast like those, teams that are racked with roster construction issues for one reason or another, that are just or just don't have that level of skill. And you look at what's especially in the Central Division with teams like Colorado and Dallas, who on a low level have had a phenomenal rivalry for a number of years, just playing absolutely phenomenal high level hockey against one another. And then Vegas, Edmonton, it's like some really remarkable, things are done on the ice in those teams, like because of just the great player dev and like the innovation that those front offices operate with.
Well, one thing I really love is how many former players are actually going into front offices now. So, I mean, I understand from their playing days to the playing days today, it's a different game. It's the same game, but it's a different game. So, I mean, they're taking their experience and being the actual player and saying, as players, this is what we needed. This is what we were looking for the organization to give us to help put us over the edge. And now that they're in the front office of these organizations, they know what those players are looking for come trade deadline time or come free agency, that they know who they want to target and go after right away, knowing that, if we get this guy, We can put him on the second line and bump this guy up from the second line and make our first line great. So by picking up one player, we're going to bolster two lines, and the guys are fit. He'll mesh with our locker room. He's a great guy. I mean, this is the great part of having so many former players up in front offices now.
Yeah, I really especially appreciate Joe Sakic in that regard. He's done phenomenal in the different FO roles he's had with the Avs. Very much building upon his very intuitive perception that he had as part of successful locker room cultures in his playing days, as well as just having phenomenal leadership qualities that still shine through in his current capacity.
Like, there's so many guys that have recently retired that, I mean, I think would make fantastic either coaches or GMs. I mean, I understand Montreal's been on a little bit of a slide recently, but with Marty St. Louis up there behind the bench, I mean, who else? I mean, he's going to be a great coach in that organization. I have a feeling he's going to be there for a while. Just from his playing experience alone, I mean, he's played with guys from, Hedman, Stamkos, all the way down. I mean, he's been with Tampa. I think he started in Tampa in 93, 94. Or I might be off. I might be off a little bit, but right around the mid-90s. And, I mean, he had a great career. He had a long career. So, I mean, he has so many connections throughout the league and so many, the way the NHL is now in most sports, there aren't really that many rivalries. I mean, there's rivalries on the ice, but these guys are all friends off the ice. So all these people that he played with or against who are now becoming other executives with other teams, I mean, just those relationships that you build from being player to player and now being executive to the executive, it's just going to make trade deadlines and other acquisitions just so much more fun because these guys all know what their players are expecting when they go out there and try to get some more talent added onto their rosters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I think one guy that got back a little bit about as far as like celebrating during the time of honor. Jaromir Jagr is such a weird situation to look at. It's not so funny, but for Pittsburgh, it was kind of but when you look at the entire team in Pittsburgh, you have Briere, you have Lemieux. So, like, it's really fascinating to see how long it took for Jagr. But that's a guy that I would have liked to see celebrated a lot sooner, but I think
I think the reason Jagr hasn't been celebrated so much yet is the guy is just legendary. I mean, he can still go out there and skate, even though he's doing it overseas right now. He still puts on a jersey and pads, and rather than being an owner, he wants to go out there and put the puck in the net. So, I mean, until he actually officially says he's done playing hockey, I don't think he can fully celebrate everything that Jagr has done.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got me by 12 years in age, I believe, and I couldn't do half of the stuff that this man is still doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, he just devotes his whole life to hockey.
Yeah.
I know when he was, I heard stories when he was here, he rented an apartment that he was never at. He was never at the apartment he had. He basically lived in the locker room and at the rink. He was there late night working on his game. He'd sleep a couple hours in the locker room, shower there, get up in the morning, skate around the building, and do everything he had to do. He was constantly at the arena working on his game his whole time in Boston. And I just turned around and said, what was the point of renting an apartment? And they were like, we don't know. He had mail going to an apartment. He had an apartment in the city, but he was just never there. He literally lived out of the TD Garden and was just constantly working on his game while he was here. And, I mean, for someone that dedicated to your trade, you're right, Damien. He definitely deserves to be celebrated, but I don't think it's going to happen until he officially steps away from the game. And with him, who knows? That could be another 5 years. I mean, he could be I never thought when he first entered the league that Jaromir Jagr was going to turn into the next Gordie Howe and play through
Right,
basically
exactly.
5 decades of hockey.
Yeah, he's very much gunning for those longevity records. Howe has that monopoly on.
I mean, you got to do that. You talk, the other guy was talking a lot about as far as talk on the game. The other guy talk about politics. But like Alexander McGill, you know, when you look at like growing the game, and just the lack of, I mean, it's just, I don't know, to me it's mind blowing. I know it's all with everybody on the bench and all and stuff, but I just, he's one of the greatest goal scorers to play the game. You look at his goals per game, it's insane.
No, you said this is Malkin, right?
McGill.
Yeah,
It's just wild.
Yeah, too many freaking ballots in a row that it just hasn't happened, and I just am absolutely baffled by it, especially considering the number of guys with inferior resumes that I've gotten in lieu of him.
Yeah, it's just crazy that Pavel Datsyuk got this before him. And I mean, obviously not like the numbers are like, because I mean, Datsyuk probably had the sickest sample by anybody. But like again, if there's no Alexander McGill, there's no Pavel Datsyuk. So it's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Anytime we played back in the day, anytime Detroit came in here, and he was one of the guys I always was worried about when he hit the ice. And same back with when Buffalo came in back in the day with McGillney. I mean, again, not enough respect going their way, but definitely someone where as soon as they came in, I mean, the name was there, the star power was there, the skill was there. So they were definitely players that you feared when that team came in. But of course, they weren't on winning teams. I mean, Datsyuk was towards the later end of his career with the Red Wings, but McGillney, I mean, the poor guy was trapped in Buffalo for how many years? And I mean, it's just he was never on a winning team, so he doesn't have that part added to his resume. And I think that's one of the reasons why he gets overlooked. But how many of these great players coming from overseas that actually put it into their game and learned, and they wouldn't be the players they were and have the skill levels they have if they weren't watching McGillney back when they were young kids, and they were trying to mimic and imitate what he was doing down at a junior level to bring that up to a professional level. So he was definitely such an influencer in the league with so many young kids that just tried to copy him and emulate him and copy that style and bring that in once they got drafted. So he's definitely a very underrated superstar that was in that era of hockey.
Yeah.
But that's where the league needs to step up and sit there and say, we need to actually celebrate the people that helped elevate the game and not just go off of how many rings have they won. It's, I hate that comparison where it's, you weren't a good player in this league and you don't deserve accolades because you don't have the Stanley Cups. And it's like so many great players, especially during the mid to late 90s to about 2010, there was so much talent that came through the NHL. It was just probably one of the best times to be a hockey fan was late 90s, early 2000s with how the game was being grown, played, how many young kids were actually learning the game from watching it. And it was just the sport absolutely just blew up with their expansions and everything else. And so many of those guys aren't even celebrated for it because they never got a cup.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I know I tried doing it, but I just wasn't the greatest skater. But, everybody had their little dreams. Everyone has a hockey stick. Everyone's played out on a frozen lake or a frozen cranberry bog or somewhere. So we've all had the dreams of making it there ourselves. But it's just a special breed to actually make it to that league.
Yeah. So competitive too. And obviously, you look at how many players come up How many players dominate juniors and then some of them obviously can't make the transition?
Yeah,
It's wild.
it's like, you know, like obviously, like you think about like I always point to the 2005 London Knights as the best Canadian Hockey League team there ever was, and obviously you had guys from that squad like Corey Perry who had impact NHL careers, won rings, a lot of individual accolades and stuff like that. But then you also had guys who were dominant at that level, like Rob Schremp, who just like never cracked the league in a meaningful way and just didn't have like the staying power. So it's just like, you know, there's just that added compete level, and just all of that skill, sometimes translatability of playing style, even that is just at that next step that not everyone gets. You know, even if they were absolutely like phenomenal at the level below that.
I always think of Nick Ritchie. So I feel bad for Chris because obviously the Ducks drafted him, but like to pretty much keep up with McDavid and well, and I just feel like he's on the squad in the NHL. It's so disappointing. But I mean, again, it's crazy next step.
I mean, I think it's funny that you just mentioned Corey Perry because, you know, you mentioned him, and it's just based off the other conversation that we just had. I think he's going to be another skilled player that goes down in history who's never going to get celebrated enough because everyone's going to look at Corey Perry and say, well, he never won the big one.
Yeah,
But it's been so long. I feel like so many fans
Yeah.
now together.
People have completely forgotten at this point that he was a member of that 2007 Ducks team.
Oh, my God, he was, wasn't he?
Yes.
That just totally went, nope, never even registered.
Yeah, it's like been totally usurped by that losing streak he's developed in the finals since then.
No, what has he been on? Like, I think he's been in the finals and lost in the last 4 seasons. Is it 4 seasons?
For the last 5.
For the last 5, yeah. And I mean, I have a feeling that, you know, as much skill as Corey Perry had, he's going to be remembered for 2 things. And it's going to be that streak, and it's going to be Connor Bedard.
Yeah.
You know, those are the old. Once you hear Corey Perry's name, probably in about 5 years from now, those are going to be the only 2 things that pop in your mind.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, like the guy was great. The guy had a great career. I mean,
he has an MVP to his name. Like, he's done a lot of great stuff ever since, like, having, you know, jumped from the Ontario Hockey League ranks as, you know, one of that league's best ever players to having like a pretty damn impressive individual resume. And having like an important supplementary role in his early NHL career on a Cup winner. That's just like slowly eroding from like the collective consciousness, basically.
right? Yeah, like I flat out forgot he was on that 07 Ducks team. You know, it's just it never even registered. But I did remember one story I forgot to share with you guys from when I was over at the airport. It was 2012 again, and David Krejci was flying out with his then girlfriend before he got married, and it was just the 2 of them. And I remember they played Vancouver that year right before the All-Star break. I think that was the final game before the break was Vancouver came back here in 2012.
Right.
And I was watching the game at my mom's house, and my son was 2 at the time. And we were watching the game, and Tracy scored a goal in that game. And my son, of course, you know, threw the hands up in the air, and he's celebrating. So I took a picture of it. And sure as hell, Tracy comes walking into the airport the next day. And it was dead. I was standing there just talking to a few friends, and I look up, and I see him walking towards me. And I just brain farted so hard. I'm staring at him, and it was just blank. So he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and he goes, "You know who I am, don't you?" I said, "Yes, I do, but I can't for the life of me. Your name is just gone." And I said, "I can see you. You're in the face-off circle, a big number 46 on your back, right there." And he says, "I'll give you a hint. I'm European, and I play hockey." here. And after he said that, it finally clicked, and I just looked at him. I'm like, yeah, thanks a lot, dude. You described 80% of the friggin' team. And it was funny as hell. He started laughing, his girlfriend was laughing, and I showed him a picture of my son who was in full, head to toe Bruins gear, and he's celebrating in front of the TV. And he took my phone and he's looking at it, and he blows up the corner of the screen and looks at his girlfriend and goes, "Look, there's me." And he blew himself up on my phone and totally ignored the rest of the picture and was just happy with the fact that we got to see his name on my phone. And that's what he wanted to show his girlfriend. Nothing else. It was the fact that it was just one of those moments where I'm sitting here looking at him like, really? Like, that's what you took out of the picture of a 2-year-old celebrating your goal, was the fact that you were in the corner? But he was, you want to talk about a down to earth guy. I mean, he is just one of those guys who will sit there. He's a guy who I can see going into politics rather than a front office somewhere. I mean, he's that much of a handshaker and is just smooth and everything else. He's a guy I can see becoming a politician rather than an executive. But he was just funny as hell.
That was a dicey game because, if memory serves, that game featured the Marchand's hit on Salo that he got disciplined for.
Right.
It was like crazy how for those few years, just because of those 7 games, there was tension between those squads for several years to the point where it felt like a standard rivalry rather than an interconference one that had just sprung up.
Well, it's funny mentioning rivalries. I talked to a bunch of my friends around here, and they're like, "Oh, there's a rivalry game coming up. We got to try to get tickets." I said, "Oh, what game are we talking about?" And they're like, "Oh, Boston, Montreal." And I look at them and I said, "Dude, this is in 1982. There's no Boston Montreal rivalry anymore. Like, that's dead. That horse got beat to death." And they're like, "No." I said, "No, Boston has some rivals out there, but right now Montreal's not one of them." I said, "We have a bigger rivalry with Toronto than we do with Montreal. We have a bigger rivalry with Tampa than we do with Montreal. We get a bigger rivalry with the Hurricanes than we do with Montreal at the moment." I said, I don't look at Montreal and think rivalry game anymore. I'm sorry. Like, that's just dead. But you're right. That Vancouver, after that series, that Vancouver rivalry that Boston, like, they were hated whenever they came to this city. I don't know how it was out there, but if anybody from Vancouver ever came here, they were hated. And believe it or not, they were actually not bad guys. I'm drawing a blank on his name now, but the gentleman that got hurt in Game 6, he got tangled up with Chuck and Mason Raymond. Thank you. So he came flying out the day of Game 7. He was flying home, and everybody had already gone. So he comes walking in. He's in a full plastic body cast. So I had to pat him down because he obviously alarmed the metal detector that came through. So I'm patting him down, and we're talking and everything. And I asked him flat out. I said, how do you feel about the hit? Everyone's talking about it being a dirty hit, and they're going back and forth and back and forth. I said, "What's your take on it?" And he says, "I've known Johnny for years, playing through this system, playing through that system. We battled each other here and there along the way, coming up and everything else." He goes, "Johnny Boychuk is not a dirty player, and the hit that Johnny gave me was not a dirty hit. He caught me at an angle that I just couldn't recover from." And he goes, "The angle I was at and the impact that he hit me with is why I got injured." He goes, "It was just one of those freak things." He goes, "I will stand to this day and say that, if going forward that he is not a dirty player and it was never a dirty hit." He goes, "He called me that night in the hospital. He called me and talked to me and everything else. And I told him flat out, it's just one of those freak things, not to worry about it, and I'll be back." And I said, I looked at him after I patted him down. I shook his hand. I said, "I hope you do come back." I said, "I don't like the jersey you wear." And he goes, "Good," because I was wearing a Bruins hat at the time. He goes, "I don't like the hat that you wear." I said, you do you do play a good hard-nosed game, and I said I hope you do bounce back from this, and we do get to see you back out there. I mean, he was a pretty stand-up guy when he came through for being in that type of shape. I mean, there was some doubt there of whether or not he was ever going to put skates on after that hit. I mean, I saw him in a full upper body cast. I mean, it was just one of those things that you see these games on TV, and then you see some of the stuff afterwards, and it just never registered that hit was that bad. To see him walking to the airport with assistance, he had to be, wheelchair into the airport, walking, looking like he was 85 years old, all bent over and body cast, and it was just like, it was one of those things that you don't register at the time of watching it live, what these guys are actually putting their bodies through, and how that's why, in my opinion, it's the hardest trophy in sports to win. But there was just so much to get back on point. After that series, you're right. It was probably a good 7-year stretch where if anybody who was on the 2011 team for Vancouver or the Canucks themselves came into Boston, that they were hated. And I'm sure it was the same up there. But it didn't matter who was on that team. I mean, it's the same as Boston going anywhere else, and everyone, the way they look at Marchand, the way they all, look at him, and the way they all hate him throughout the league. Well, not the league, but any other city in the league that, if Marchand goes to that city, as soon as he touches the puck, he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
And it was like that for any person who played on the 2011 Canucks team when they came through here for a good, probably 6 to 7 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But
it's kind of fun. I feel like Boston, definitely the rivalry with Florida now is pretty great, too.
It's going to be a great rivalry.
It's just Boston hate. They were from Boston hate Matthew Tkachuk so much. And it's just, it's entertaining because obviously, again, Tkachuk's the perfect Bruin, But did you guys see that video of him at that hospital last week with the kids helping him lift the team?
Yeah.
It's just hockey. The guys really are the best. And when you see these guys win the time, even when you don't, obviously, you see them going to the hospital. It's just they're just such bad guys. And again, I saw a lot of Bruins fans were like, I hate them on the ice, but you have to love them off the ice.
Well, that's why I told you at work when we were trying to work out that deal with Ottawa. I mean, I would have traded the whole farm system to get Brady Tkachuk over here and have the two of them in that rivalry go head to head for probably the next 5 to 6 years if we were able to trade for him and lock him up. That would have been great hockey. And that would have only added more fuel to that rivalry if we were able to pick up Brady and have him go for the next 5 to 6 years, playing against his brother like that. That would have been phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
But no, we get Corpusalo instead.
Yep. Yep. Oh, man.
Did you guys happen to catch any of the NHL honor awards at the end of the season?
I saw a little bit.
I talked with so many friends of mine after that aired, and it was, I don't know how people were able to sit through that the whole night. I mean, sitting at home and watching it was uncomfortable. I don't know how those players were able to. I don't know who wrote that. I don't know who was in charge of putting that show together. I mean, having it in Vegas was great, but if they don't change that by next year, they're going to lose all viewership to that 100%, in my opinion, the way they had that televised this last season. In my opinion, that was just one of the most. It was uncomfortable for everybody. Us watching at home, the players that were there, even some of the presenters that they had. You can just tell there was just the biggest level of uncomfortability. And I don't know why they do this right after the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, these guys are already on their own time. Their season's over. They don't want to come back and do a league event like this. I mean, they should do it from when the season ends to before the first game of the playoffs start. That's when they should hold the NHL honors. Because everyone will still be in good spirits. A lot of guys that just pushed the envelope and they were on the cusp and their team just missed a playoff spot, but they're still proud of the season they had. They're going to be in good spirits when they're there. The superstars that are actually in the playoffs, they're looking forward to the upcoming playoff season. So they're going to be in good spirits when they're there. And it's just, if they did it in between the regular season ending and the playoffs starting, I think they'd get a much better product out of that than what they actually put out.
Right. And everything has been like, especially with how like the home away schedule for playoff series has shifted, to the current format it's in with the 2-2-1-1-1, and then having days off on top of that, making the postseason as long as it was. To have ceremonies after that as well, a season that already lasts well into summer, when nobody's even thinking about that sport anymore. It's just like, it's, a totally self-defeating thing that the NHL, oversight has been facilitating, to the point where I agree with the point Christian made a few weeks back. I would rather the season start in September than for, us looking practically into July when we're finding out who the cup winner is and who the remaining award winners are.
I think this is the first time that I can remember that the NBA championship was finished and wrapped up and done before the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, normally it's the NBA that has it wrong, and they're running to mid-July, and for hockey to do it this year, it was just like the format. Go back to the old format, and one day off in between games. Well, the guys are tired.
Yeah.
It works both ways. They're both flying in each direction.
Yeah, and an argument I've heard against the old 2-3-2 format was that, the team with home ice might not get to play, more home games, which doesn't really seem fair or, in line with the purpose of home ice advantage to begin with. But it's just like, it's gotten so out of hand with the additional travel and the additional rest days that it's, a detriment to the product. So it makes a good deal more sense to go back to 2-3-2 at this point.
Right. Either that, or if you want the home team to have the advantage, go 3-2-2. And if you want those 3 home games to start the playoff series, finish better.
Yeah.
I mean, from fans at home, I don't care if it's a home game or an away game. As long as we're getting through the series and we're moving on to the next round, I don't care if it's a home game or if it's an away game. I mean, the way some of these NHL teams travel now and the fans are so nationwide, I mean, is there really such thing as home ice anymore? I mean, every arena is built just the same. The only thing that's changed arena to arena basically is the logo in the front of the ice. All the boards are all the same now. They all use the same company. They're all running the same designs with these flashy LED banners that run across the boards now, and they're all running the same advertisements. And the crowds are everywhere. I mean, the crowds travel. The fans are going to travel. So, in my opinion, in this day and age, home ice is gone. So,
Yeah.
if go to a 3-2-2, go back to a 2-3-2. I mean, do what you want to do as long as you see your team on TV, because you can't make it. Even season ticket holders don't make it to every game. Playoffs, regular season, they don't make it to every game. So as long as you're watching your team move on to the next round, you don't care where that game is played. I mean, even in the COVID year when they were doing it in the bubble and playing with empty arenas, and we were still watching.
Yeah.
We were still watching. Home ice advantage was completely gone. I mean, you could have just put everybody on Lake Placid and said, you have the ice at this time, you have the ice at this time, and everybody still would have watched and cheered on their team. And it would, so in my opinion, home ice is a dead thing. In other sports, it's still relevant, but I don't think it's that relevant in hockey anymore because the teams travel so well, and hockey's catching on in more and more markets where, I mean, you go down to Florida as a Bruins fan. Bruins fans outweigh Florida fans in regular season games. Playoffs is a different animal, but in regular season games, Boston fans are outweighing the Florida fans. Boston fans are outweighing the Tampa fans. It's almost a 50-50 when we go down to Raleigh and play against the Canes. New York, Boston, it's the crowds are basically the same in either building for whether it's the Islanders or the Rangers now. So home ice is a dead thing.
Yeah, they travel well, and a lot of people from this region have moved down south, and continued their fandom of their hometown team. So the presence that can be felt in those arenas, like especially the Miami area sports teams don't get, and their fan bases specifically, I should say, they don't get enough shit for their habits of showing up late and then leaving early. You know,
Right.
it's very much a thing. So it's definitely just one of those reflections of how you're gonna have your strong supporters, and if you watch a broadcast in just about any network, that's the case. There are a lot of road fans there, to where it's very much you can see the zeitgeist has shifted a lot over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it doesn't matter what city what game you're watching. I mean, you can watch a Dallas Colorado game, and it could be in Colorado, and there's more Dallas fans than Colorado fans, or vice versa. Or it doesn't matter where it is. I mean, with so many players that go into free agency now, a lot of people, they like the local team, they support the team, but a lot of people are more fans of individual players. So they're following that player as to where they go rather than just a whole team themselves. And that's something that, I don't think the league ever saw was going to happen. I mean, it was just, you're a fan of this team and that's your team and that's it. And now people are more fans of one athlete, or, so they're following that athlete no matter where he goes. And it's, if you're one of the more popular athletes, of course, you're going to have more people that are switching allegiances and, going to that bandwagon jumping, so to say. I was with this team, but my guy left, so now I'm gonna be a fan of the Knights. Like, I love the Vegas Golden Knights. It's so great. They've been around for 4 years. What do you mean it's so great? Not to take anything away from Vegas. I mean, the way they built that organization and everything out there. I mean, it's been a top-notch organization from day one. But just using them as an example, it's like, nothing about the team themselves. You don't even know the name of the building they play in, and now all of a sudden you're Vegas' #1 fan because your guy signed there. And I think that's what the league's seeing with a lot of these people, which is why the home ice is gone, because a lot of people are just following individual players rather than a team themselves, which is the way a lot of sports are trending to these days. I mean, it's not like it was when, not to age myself, but we were younger, and we actually, you used to, back in the day, know which player was on which line, who played best with who, where they went to school. You could sit there and mimic everything, and you looked forward to, you knew who the all-stars were, you knew exactly what team they came from. You looked forward to getting playing cards and trading them with your friends. And a lot of that is just this whole sport, the landscape of the sport has changed, where they don't even do any of that stuff anymore. And it's just, you just follow a guy and that's it. He's your guy and that's who you follow.
Yeah, and I think fantasy, when we look at fantasy sports leagues, fantasy hockey, fantasy basketball, football, I think that's a huge part too. Where now it's obviously again you're really hyper fixated on that one player, and you're following that one player like you're saying. But I think at the same time too, it also adds to the toxicity when we look at social media and online. Where it's you want that one player to do so well, where again, look at hey, this player goes in. And all of his players he sucks at 8 scoring points. So that adds to more of I think the pressures and stressors of, and again, it's not just hockey, it's every sport with that. But now you're seeing a lot more pressure on players too, because now everybody's so much more verbal and locked into game performance.
Yeah. So this is backtracking a lot, but it's funny because I was thinking about the Boston Ottawa trade interaction, and it's there's always going to be an uphill battle in terms of making the big swing on the trade market within your division, and then facing a guy who is legit a bunch of times a season. I think I think the last time, and maybe there has been something of equal significance since then, but the last time we really saw like the big splash between division rivals might have been the Kjell Samuelson and Rick Tocchet and Ken Reggett to Pittsburgh between them and Philly with Mark Recchi as the centerpiece back in like '92. Like it's like when paths cross like that, it definitely feels like the exception, not the rule. And like I do wonder if GMs kind of think along those lines.
Well, in my opinion, Boston dropped the ball during that whole trade process because they boxed themselves out completely. By the time they actually moved Almach, they knew they only had one buyer that they could actually move him to, and they waited too long in actually making that deal. If they were the first team to trade away a goalie and let Ottawa acquire the goalie, then they would have gotten a better return in that trade. But at the time they pulled the trigger on that trade, basically the only place Almach could have ended up was Ottawa. And Ottawa knew that. So they were sitting there saying, why are we going to give away the future when they want to move on from this guy and we're the only team that can take him?
Right.
So they held every bit of leverage when that trade actually happened. That they knew what they wanted to give up. I mean, we never would have traded Almach and get back Korpisalo with 80% of his salary if they didn't wait so long and pull on the trigger on that trade.
I think Don Sweeney often the way he operates is a reminder that sometimes you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. You just have to get there first. In like a lot of different executive positions in sports, especially, like I had to note that historically, like no matter their level of repute, goaltenders have not yielded in the modern age a very good return on the trade market as is. So it
No.
is kind of an uphill battle. And plus, like, especially when you're dealing with divisional opponents as well, like, uh, the framework of the deal might include that, but, like, there's the same reason why like Jacob Chikrin didn't end up going to Boston either. Like Steve Staios isn't going to give like a prime asset to a team that he's going to have to face a bunch of times. He'd rather give it to someone else in the Eastern Conference, which has ended up happening with the Washington Capitals. In a different division than someone he's going to have to be facing regularly, especially when they're trying to pull themselves out of that mediocre hell that they've been in of having great roster talent, but not performing well cohesively and having all these other troubles they've been having.
No, I get that. It's just, Sweeney, I can't wrap my head around him sometimes. I mean, he makes moves where it's like, this guy is like one of the greatest GMs we've had around here, and like he's great. I love him, fantastic move. And then he makes moves that you look at and you're like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know who's on your consulting team and who you talked to and told you that this is gonna be beneficial for us and this is gonna work out. Like, I understand why so many people have called for his head around here on so many different occasions, and then all of a sudden again he'll make a few deals and he'll make something happen, and all of a sudden he goes back. Like, he has the most roller coaster GM career of anybody that I've ever seen in such the longest time, where he's had so many peaks and so many, valleys where it's just up and down and up and down. And even what was it back in 2019? Was it the 18 or 19 draft where we had those 3 first-round picks in a row?
2015.
Was it 15?
Yeah.
But why they made all, like, everyone was. I'm surprised he survived that, especially around here, because everybody was calling for his head when he made all 3 picks.
Yeah, like when you have like DeBrusque, Boral, and Zaneshin be your picks, when you have guys like Kyle Connor and Matt Barzal on the board that are going to be good no matter where they go, like that is a very rough first draft to have. And it's like, you want to almost give them like the benefit of the doubt to a degree, because I mean they did have a much better go about next year. I mean McAvoy came out of that 2016 class. Like they've had apparently the same director of amateur scouting for 21 years, and those guys have a lot of input on that process. And oftentimes the scouts are from previous regimes, so they were inheriting that shit show. But of course, you know, um, it's been like that particular part of hockey ops for Boston seems like to have been stagnant for a while, to where yeah, maybe they get it right sometimes, but like you have that, and then apparently that Adam McQuaid is actually their director of player development now.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Yes.
there are parts of that part of the operation that probably are in that have probably due for reshuffling, and to say nothing of the fact that Sweeney often doesn't have the intestinal fortitude to go for the big swing when it comes to deals either.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved Adam McQuaid as a player, but it seemed like his career development was stagnant or halted himself as he was playing here. I mean, he could have done so much more, and now to put him in charge of player development, and it's like, you kind of halted yourself. I don't know if it was the coaches that you had, or your learning, or what. It was getting lost with what they were trying to have him do and what he could have done. And to take somebody who basically halted and put him in charge of player development now, I mean, there was so many different people that you could have put into that spot. I mean, I don't know how he is in his assistant, because I just see him behind the bench, but you don't see what he's actually doing. I think Chris Kelly would have been better at player development than Adam McQuaid has done, in my opinion. I mean, here's a guy who, when we got Chris Kelly, I mean, he elevated his career when he actually came into Boston, rather than, and I don't think McQuaid ever did that. He came in, he was this, and he just never elevated whatsoever. He either took a step back or just stayed on a straight line.
I should amend my statement. Ryan Nato has been in the org for a long time, especially like in big executive roles for over a decade. But he is relatively new to being the absolute head of amateur scouting, although he's been an associate for a number of years as well. But yeah, I feel like Jacobs kind of runs it like an old boys club to a degree, which often sometimes like serves to an organization's detriment. Like, I mean, I like some of what Danny Briere and Keith Jones are doing for us. My team now, but like for years, with like Paul Holmgren, Ron Hextall, Bobby Clark, those guys would get long in the tooth, and they got that job basically because of organizational nepotism. And
Right.
they would either fuck it up or they just overstay their welcome. So it's just like sometimes playing those sort of favors doesn't really pan out. As I think like having former players in that realm recently covered like. It works, but like having voices for certain philosophies that are retreads to your organization doesn't pay off.
Well, the nepotism is everywhere. I mean, what it is a lot of these owners fell in love with the name and fell in love with the player as a player. So if he was this good as a player, and I loved him and treated him so well, and he was so great as a player and the name, he's going to be great no matter what he does. And it's like, no, stop falling in love with the name. Look at the actual job performance, and you'll see that some of these people that you're putting into these spots are hurting your organization more than they're helping. And someone's got to step up, and one of these owners has to step up and say, no, we're making a whole front office move. And as much as crap as he gets, and not to cross sports with you guys, but as much crap as he gets for being an owner / GM down in Dallas with Jerry Jones, he knows what's going on with his team, and he knows what's best for his coaching staff. He knows exactly who's where, who's doing their job, and who's not. So we need more owners to actually have that mentality of not actually like be the GM yourself, but have a voice. Don't just sit back and collect a paycheck from owning the team. Have a voice to say, no, I don't want us to go in this direction. I think we need to make a change here. I think this is too stiff, and just turn around and tell the GM or tell the president or the how they put it in hockey, the governor or the, team president, that we're making these changes. And if you don't like it, we can make a change with you as well. I mean, these are the guys whose pockets are actually the most affected, is the owners. And a lot of these owners are afraid to just say, I want it done this way, and that's it. And I think if more owners did, then, the sport would be better off, because we'd get a lot more talent being equally distributed amongst the league, and we wouldn't have all these, basement teams that are just stuck there forever because the talent's being more equally distributed. My opinion.
Yeah. Arizona Coyote with ownership that just did not care.
Yeah. And like, for a positive example, like the one thing I like about the current organizational culture with the Flyers right now is like, Dan Hilferty was appointed, the chairman of Comcast Spectator, so he's basically the absolute head of the ownership group. And, he's a Jersey Shore guy, grew up loving Philadelphia sports, understands the culture, what it takes to be successful in it, what the organizational needs are, and how to be hands-on and with the community in a proper way. And I think that might be something that pays off for them long-term and should be more of a standard thing in sports ownership and operation.
Well, I mean, it's funny how you mentioned that the Jacobs are running this organization like an old boys club, because that's exactly what it is. And unfortunately, a lot of people around here don't see, even though Jeremy is still the official owner of the team, it's Charlie that's actually making,
right,
in my opinion, all the decisions for this team.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeremy Jacobs, I think, is going to be like close to 87, 88 years old. There's no way he's making organizational decisions anymore. And I think he could probably do so many great things with this team, but with Jeremy still alive, I don't think he's going to have full control to do what he wants with this team until he actually fully inherits it.
Yeah,
I think Charlie could actually do a lot of good for this organization once he can get out from full control of his dad.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. So we did go over a little bit, but that's fine. There is some flexibility. So the standard operation here is for me to do a quick rundown of some things that are happening on the developmental level. So obviously, off-season time, but this is when camps do happen for international tournaments, like at the U18, U20 levels. For instance, at the U18s, summer camps for selection purposes are happening for the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, which is arguably even more prestigious than the IIHF U18 World Championships, because since it doesn't coincide with junior hockey seasons, all the best U18 players are available. So that camp is going on right now. Canada's roster's got some good names, that are kicking around. Especially in their forward group, that'll be eligible for the next few drafts. Among them, most notably, Caleb Denoyer from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, specifically Moncton. He's considered one of the exceptional players at the center position that'll be eligible for the draft in 2025. Gavin McKenna, 2026 eligible. By and far the best player in that class, it seems like. Probably the next inheritor to the generational talent mantle from Connor Bedard. He's up there. Some personal favorite of mine, Cole Resney from Victoria in the Western Hockey League. Ryan Rubrock, another 2026 eligible name. Michael Misa, top prospect, one of very few CHL players to receive exceptional player status that allowed him to enroll in the league early. Just recently won the Memorial Cup, was invited but was not able to attend. According to the Athletics, Scott C. Wheeler, this was due to the fact that he was playing through various ailments during the Memorial Cup, just taking this time to recuperate, prepping for his draft eligibility season. But yeah, great campaign he had with Saginaw, considering what he was working with. I had the U.S. roster here too. Oh yeah,
So for the U.S., with the plethora of talent produced by the USA Hockey, they split that up into Team Blue and Team White for the World Junior Summer Showcase, which will be happening starting within the next week. Let's see. So on Team Blue, some noteworthy names include, let's see, Ryan Leonard from Boston College, Washington Capitals prospect. Let's see. Christopher Pelosi, third round selection by the Boston Bruins in 2023, committed to Winnipeg. Cole Hudson, Boston University bound, another cap selection. Gabriel Peralt of the New York Rangers organization, also of Boston College. Plenty of good options here. On Team White, Teddy Stiga, Boston College, Nashville Predators. Max Swanson, Pittsburgh Penguins, 7th round selection, headed to the University of North Dakota. Great talent in the USHL, was both their regular season and playoff MVP. Let's see, who else we got? Zeev Boyum, absolutely phenomenal offensive defenseman at the University of Denver, just taken by Minnesota, 12th overall. Quentin Musty, San Jose Sharks, plays up in Canada, Sudbury Wolves of the OHL. Cole Eiserman, local kid, Newburyport, Mass, Boston University bound this coming year, just drafted by the Islanders at 20th overall. That U20 roster definitely looks solid. What else have I got on my notes here? Let's see, so for Canada's roster for the World Juniors Select, this was actually included in a press release by the NHL pretty recently. Let's see, who are the headliners here? What do we got? Let's see. I see Tisha Ginla was referenced in conversation earlier. Zane Perek of Saginaw, just recently taken by Calgary. Great pick at 9th overall. Carter Sutherland of the Portland Winterhawks, the WHL's overwhelming leader in plus minus, very underrated Flyers prospect. Let's see. Denver Barkey, of course, they're a great diamond in the rough in the Flyers organization. Oh man, they have a lot of options. I wasn't particularly impressed, although I think one thing that distinguishes this group from the one at the World Juniors this year was, I think the goaltending selections were better, but I think they have a really, really good player pool with this class. It was clear that the U.S. was going to run away with it this season, but it's going to be some pretty tight competition, it looks like, this time around. On a quick note about the WHL, the Spokane Chiefs hired a new head coach by the name of Brad Lauer. He had a terrific tenure with the Edmonton Oil Kings. He is the WHL's all-time leader in winning percentage. He won the Dunk McCollum Memorial Trophy in 2020 as the league's Coach of the Year. Led them to a league championship in 2022. Spokane has produced some good talent over the years, and recently had a great gem in Berkeley Catton, taken by the Seattle Kraken, pretty high in this year's draft. Very good, speedy center. Just didn't have a lot to work with, and I think it seemed like the org was just kind of getting stuck in a rut. So we'll see if this head coaching hire kind of gives them a bump and sort of revitalizes the energy in the room. Definitely a good note for them to start on in their off season. And beyond that, unfortunately, I have to report that it seems as though I'm going to check just in case anything popped up in the last minute, but this has been the overwhelming tendency for quite some time now.
Uh, let's see. No, they announced their schedule.
No, it seems that the Everett Silvertips have still not signed defenseman Landon DuPont, who was taken first overall in this year's WHL Bantam draft after being allowed to enter the draft early by exceptional player status to his scholarship and development agreement. And it doesn't seem like there have been any updates on the progress of those talks. So I don't even know what to say about that whole situation at this point. But hopefully before the season starts up, they'll have that squared away. And that about covers it for this week's Dev League coverage. So now we can roll it around into our big finish. I don't really have anything proper scripted for this week for my take what I really want to get out there. Damien, what do you got in store for us? What's going on with this feed?
I think he froze.
Not again. Let me see.
I'm gonna try to. Oh yeah, he dropped it. Let's see. He'll probably pop back up in just a second, unless his phone died, because that's happened before.
He had it on the charger too. It was pretty remarkable. And he just drops out of the feed because his phone gave out while he was charging it and talking with us. It was fortunately it was right at the end of an episode, just like this. So he had just finished bringing it up rather than just launching into it. Let me see. Okay, there we go. Yeah, he hasn't provided me with any sort of update. Let me see if he hasn't popped back up. Or I guess I'll bounce off of you here, Steve. So just like basically we do kind of like a quick bullet point take format as to like something we might have a strong opinion on that we really want to get out there. I figured I'd offer you a chance to partake in that tradition. Is there a hockey related take that you would like to cast off to our viewers?
I think Boston dropped the ball on this offseason. I think they caved to the pressure of trying to get back to the big bad Bruins and going with so much size in this offseason and not going with speed, I think is going to actually hurt them this whole season. And if we're lucky, we might be a bubble team if we make the playoffs at all this year. Is how I'm taking away this offseason so far.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because like I was, just as like someone like who's hoping to observe like good quality hockey, like knowing the sort of cap space for a while now that they would have going into the summer, that skill and just adding pace was going to be a top priority, but instead, they just had like this very like reactionary, like very backwards, old hockey fan thinking approach to it. It was just pretty disappointing to watch it as the neutral observer.
I think they took it as Florida pushed us around way too much. So they tried to bulk up, which is going to hurt them in the long run to even make the playoffs in the upcoming year because you don't have the speed, you don't have the skill to skate with majority of these teams that have gotten faster and have gotten more skilled over the offseason. And that's where I think they caved to the pressure of trying to get back to the 1970s, early 80s big bad Bruins, which, it's not even that type of league anymore. And I think they caved and just got scared of being pushed around by Florida so much over the last two postseasons that they opted to go size rather than speed and skill. And I think it's going to hurt them.
Yeah. It's like I see teams like having this evaluation of like um, you know we're getting bullied too easily, and then just having so much of their transaction center on that. Like, it seems like the New Jersey Devils have fallen victim to that mentality as well. Like, I
Yeah.
think they gave up too much in that Ball Cotter trade. Uh, and it's funny because, like, basically, they were more or less replicating what they did when they picked up McDermott from the Avalanche. It's just like with a higher price tag. And, like, especially knowing that yeah, I know Akira Street didn't have like the best season, but like I don't really diagnose him as the issue, and I definitely think he's still a goaltender waiting to break out. And I think like you've spent that high pick on Alexander Holtz, like having him as like even just having like that strong potential of being like a good goal scorer, like, and just having that, giving up those sort of assets for a fourth liner, because he's tough, like, it is just absolute foolishness. And it's like, you know, uh, uh, always just something you kind of have to shake your head at because it's not really like an essential part of roster building to where you should be spending significant cap space or assets on it.
Well, this is kind of brings us back to a point we talked about earlier with so many former players that are taking on executive roles and scouting roles and developmental roles in these organizations that it's not the same game that they played when they were actually on the ice. And they're trying to build their team as if it was that same game. And it's not the big bruising physical, let's have 5 fights a game type of hockey anymore. And that's as much as I like the former players in these executive positions. I think that's where it's detrimental to the organization because that's why the talent they're going after.
Yeah. So I guess my reflection point for this week, I think I'm gonna address the recent big time draft selection made by the Canadiens in the form of Ivan Demidov. Like, and I guess I've been sort of sitting on this one for a while. I'm kind of confused as to what the direction is here organizationally, and like for this individual player as well. Even just looking at him in a vacuum with his own thing, like so Martin St. Louis' aspiration, interestingly enough, he's indicated in interviews, is that he wants to construct, a team system that's built upon a similar approach to what Rod Brindamore does down in Raleigh with the Canes, with having this very tight man-to-man defensive structure. Instead, it's starting to build the pipeline for that when it takes like shape by adding, someone who I think plays like a strong north-south game and can play that sort of D. You kind of drafted a kid who's very talented. He has that Kirill Kaprizov type Russian goal scorer element to him. He's definitely got a bright future ahead of him, but like definitely like that was an opportunity where I think they could have actually afforded to add somebody with sort of that grit to them, but who still has like the upside in the physical attributes and athleticism to play in this game, which this class did have a fair bit of, despite being kind of an average draft class. But beyond that, so the story with Demidov, basically, for those who are less familiar with what's been going on with Russian prospects, he's been absolutely destroying the Russian junior leagues, but he hasn't had much staying power in the KHL. And, his playing style, like, is very much one of those things that you can't really get away with, where he's, like, cutting to the middle, getting, like, your knees blown out by defenders who aren't taking kindly to that sort of thing, which has happened to him on multiple occasions at this point, which is one of the things that slowed him down. So it's like there's this rush to get him over to North America and playing for the Habs. It's like it seems to me like he needs to prove himself on the pros first, but his own Russian club, SKA St. Petersburg, I don't know if there's really a place for him on the roster at this point. And with him only having a year left on his deal, he can't be loaned out for the contract agreement. So it's like
they've definitely inserted themselves into like a tough situation here with this selection. And it's just like, the kid, I think Demidov can definitely turn himself into a star in this league, but like it's gonna definitely be an uphill battle for him to get there.
No, I agree. This year's draft, I mean, there were a lot of picks where it's a lot of surprising picks, in my opinion, that actually went off. I mean, I forget the young man's name, but even he looked like. Did you see the look on his face when they called his
Yes,
name?
Beckett Seneca, the Ducks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he even looked at his parents and was just like it was just utter shock that even he got picked. So I think this year's draft actually confused more people that rather than excited a lot of people. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, um that was, because like one of my specialties like that I write about a lot, that I talk about on here, is like I definitely like follow the Canadian Hockey League organizations like pretty closely to get a gauge on like guys who have their rights or guys who are upcoming that'll be like touted in the draft. And like uh that kid went on a terrific playoff run with this like phenomenal shooting percentage. Like, when it happens for pros, people say that a regression is going to happen, but when it happens for prospects, it's treated in a different light, where like they consider that a sign of development, and that might have been part of the screws and bolts there. But beyond that, the kid, he's just at like an awkward stage, like as he had a huge growth spurt during the year, so he's figuring out all the new working parts and stuff like that. Which like figure that out over a few years, it'll be all right. But like, I imagine, but like it definitely was a reach. Like when you consider like players with at least higher floors, more of a sure thing, or guys who are even more likely to reach their ceilings that were still available. Definitely kind of a perplexing pick on Anaheim's part.
Right. No, I don't know what else is next on you guys' agenda here, but I mean, I had an absolute ball coming on with you guys tonight, so I wanted to actually take a minute and say thank you. I appreciate the time. I know I've rambled a little bit here and there, so I appreciate the extra time you guys gave me on certain subjects, and I just wanted to say I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun tonight. So
Yeah, this was like, we had initially set this out with like an hour and a half time frames, but we've never actually really hit the higher end of that. So like, it was good to have it happen in like a very like exciting environment with these great anecdotes and perspectives coming in from a new voice. So we were really happy to have this happen as well. Thank you for coming on, man.
no, I appreciate it. I enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll be back again.
Yeah, we would love it. Yeah, the door is definitely open. And thank you for everybody. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Thank you to the Spotify listeners that come by when this goes up. We had some phenomenal viewership peaks this time around. We really appreciate it. We'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Good night.